Hello everyone, thanks for joining in. I am Shubha Kankaria and welcome to episode 8 of Daastan-E-Raahi. It is a travel talk where we get to know about amazing places through wonderful stories of various travelers. So our today's guest is an architect by profession. He decided to visit 30 countries before he turned 30, but eventually ended up visiting 40 countries. Today, he's going to talk about his solo travels and how architecture, music, and food plays an important role in his travels. So, guys, without any further delay, let's get on board Nishad Kulkarni.
Thanks.
Yeah, welcome to
Yeah,
Daastan.
welcome to
I'm
Daastan
so
Party.
excited to have you.
To have you. Yes, thank you so much. Excited to be here.
Yeah, okay, so to
Yeah, okay,
begin
so to
with, tell us how
tell
solo
us how
traveling
solo
started for
traveling
you.
started for you. So basically, actually, it started a long time ago, around 8 to 9 years ago.
Mhm.
So basically, I always tell people that I used to be an introvert, and actually, I wanted to get that thing out of me. I because I had this urge of going to places, meeting new people, but there was this no, there was this thought of this anxiety within me कि मैं कर पाऊंगा या नहीं कर पाऊंगा. It's a bit scary to go and talk to people directly. But then one day I just decided, I have to go it because that feeling of seeing places is much more than that anxiety. So then I decided, I'll start within India, traveling within India. So basically, I quit my job.
Okay.
I actually sold some possessions that I had, and with that money, I traveled to Auroville, which is near Pondicherry in South India.
Okay.
So there, I basically volunteered in a forest. So it's this cool place called Sadhana Forest in Auroville,
Okay.
where you can basically volunteer and volunteer to like plant trees, and it's a sustainable community. So then I started interacting with people there, and like this whole new of living and working and just existing. Like I became exposed to that kind of alternative lifestyle, basically. So
Okay.
that is how I started solo traveling, which was like super scary, super fun, and I had a lot to learn in that.
And that kind of
Yeah.
turned you into an extrovert.
An extrovert. Yeah, so basically, like it started with that, and as I started talking to people, listening to their stories, listening to their version of events, then I eventually learned that like me and that other person is the same. Basically, we're having the same journey. It's like a shared common human experience. So then that introvertedness just snapped out of me. I'm like, literally everyone is going through the same shit. So why, why be scared to talk to people? So that eventually, I like became an extrovert. I started talking to more people. I wanted to listen to their stories, listen to their how they perceive travel, how do they travel, where have they traveled, what exciting adventures did they have when they traveled.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually, that whole transition happened from an introvert to an extrovert in all of these travels, basically.
Interesting. So you
Interesting.
have traveled
You have
solo in
traveled
India, you
solo
have
in India,
traveled
you have
solo in other
traveled
parts of
solo
the
in
world.
other parts of the world.
So
So,
how different
how,
it
how
is to
different
travel
it is
solo
to
in India in
travel solo in
comparison
India
to
in
other
comparison to
countries?
other countries? So basically, there are a lot of differences if you talk about solo traveling in India and solo traveling, let's say, in Southeast Asia or Europe. I think the main difference would be the accommodation.
Okay.
So in India right now, like in the last 4 or 5 years, we've become used to hostels and backpacking, like youth hostels and stuff like that, like with this hostel being like a very big player in the industry right now.
Yeah.
But this hostel culture has always existed in Europe and Southeast Asia since the last 30, 40 years. And then there's, like there's various types of hostels. You've got like nice quiet hostels. You've got a party hostel where, like you just literally go to party. And these are located in like major cities in Europe, in Thailand, in Vietnam, where it's like a very fun, young vibe they have got going on. Sometimes there's live music. There's usually a bar in the hostel. So it's like it's like a big party with strangers going on. And that's also like an experience in itself. Like just being at that hostel, even if you don't step out, but just being at that hostel, listening to people, interacting with them, that itself is an experience. So this is a major difference. What I've seen traveling here and there is the quality of hostels, the quality of accommodation that you get, and the price basically.
Hmm.
So even in Europe, it's still quite cheap to travel in hostels. It's like 5 euros, 10 euros, which is like 500, 800 rupees, which is basically the same price as India.
Right.
But if you look at Europe, then it's cheaper that way.
Right.
Uh, One more like stark difference that I've noticed is the transportation, of course,
Okay.
is the accessibility, the connectivity that Europe or other countries allow you to have. Basically, so their entire transportation system is online. You can book online, you can track the bus online, there's Wi-Fi in the buses, there's washrooms inside the buses.
Hmm.
Uh, so there's very less chance of going wrong in that. Doesn't matter what country you're in, what language they speak, everything is going to be in English on the online platform.
Okay.
So, and if they say the bus is going to leave at 5, it does leave at 5, it does reach at 10.
Hmm.
So, which doesn't happen here.
Right.
But I always tell people that each has its own, pros and cons, because like missing a bus in India, or, like bus breaking down in the middle of nowhere in India, that's also fun, like you've got to experience that as well.
Yeah.
नहीं तो मतलब it becomes very monotonous. So, but like, yeah, these are some of the differences that I've seen.
Agreed. And I think the hostel part which you said, I don't think the party hostel exists in India as of now.
It doesn't. It doesn't. So, as far as I know, there are a few hostels in Goa recently which have come up, which like they have sort of that culture, but it's still like way in its infancy in India right now. Because if you talk about, like Germany, like in Berlin, or even Paris or Amsterdam, they've got this like big culture of party hostels, which like you go in and the reception is a bar itself. They'll like literally welcome you with a shot, and then you check in, and then they've got these drinking games going on and pub crawls happening. So it's like a very very fun vibe in these party hostels.
Yeah, really sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on, Nishad, you are an architect. So, in terms of architecture, which places you have liked the most, you have been and, really liked those places? And also, has that inspired you in any way in your work?
Yeah, of course it does. So basically, architecture is also like one of the biggest reasons that I started traveling. I'm a big fan of history. I'm a big fan of cultures around the world, and I think architecture ties all of that, because it like it's basically like a like it's like a symbiotic relationship between like art and science and music and language and culture and food, and all of that ties into architecture. So like that's a good way of gauging a country's culture or their lifestyle. So of course, yes, like architecture is one of my biggest parameters when I travel. And saying so like I have done some travels exclusively just to see the architecture of that place. One being Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka is like a very very underrated place in my opinion. Like it's literally 2 hours from India. Like anywhere from India, you can get like a 2 hour flight to go to Sri Lanka. It's very similar to India in terms of its culture and the lifestyle, but yet it's like a whole world apart, because they've got like a different history, they've got a different culture while being in South Asia, and that reflects in its architecture. So it's got one of the like world's they are some of like the world's pioneers in some sorts of architecture as well. Um, so it's basically called tropical regionalism. So basically, showcasing what your country is famous for, showcasing your local materials, your local art forms, your local building styles, and that is what Sri Lanka has done successfully. So they have combined that traditional approach and a modern approach. So many of their modern buildings also look traditional, feel traditional, yet they are suited for a modern environment. So that's like Sri Lanka is one of the most beautiful places to visit architecturally as well.
Okay.
Um, then one more is Spain.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Spain is a very, very, very beautiful country. It's got some amazing old architecture, medieval architecture. They have managed to successfully preserve their, like 500-year-old churches, 500-year-old palaces, and all of that. And when I say preserving or conserving, it's just not like turning that place into a museum. So that place literally has the same function as it used to have 500 years ago.
Okay.
Or maybe they have converted a part of that into a museum. Or there are some places where a church is converted into a nightclub, or it's converted into a bar, or it's converted into a hostel. So, like they've kept the use of that place still there. I mean, it's not kept in the showcase where you can just look at it. It's like you can still feel the whole place through that.
Yeah.
So this is like this whole idea of like combining travel and those buildings, combining travel and architecture. Spain has done really, really amazing. So when I traveled to Spain, I lived in this hostel in Sevilla, which was like in a 120-year-old building in the old city.
Okay.
And that building like used to be a man, like some rich family's mansion many, many years ago, but they converted that place into a hostel. So it's like that. It's got like an old world charm, but it's a party hostel as well. So the rooftop is a bar. Then like the ground floor living room is a reception, and every bedroom is like a dorm basically. And then you can
Interesting.
see the entire old town from that area. So these things they have managed to do very, very well in Spain.
Okay.
So yeah, like these two countries
Nice. And what
definitely.
else inspires you? And also, like I asked, that does your work has that impact your travels?
Yeah. So it definitely does because whenever I travel to any place, a certain motif, a certain art element, or a certain style of architecture, like remains in my head, right? And when I'm designing something for a client, okay, I'll tell him, like I traveled here last month. This is something really good that I saw. Let's do it in your house. So that like that reflects in my work as well, and then it becomes like a very good thing for the client also, because like it becomes less story for them. It becomes a nice big breaker for them. It becomes a conversation starter, like, oh, like this let's say this living room is inspired from Spain, let's say. And
Yeah.
then like they've also got like a nice point within their house to tell people. So that I usually try to do and incorporate my travels and what I've seen in my travels in my work as well. So it definitely does help a lot.
That is very, very interesting. And like you said, music also inspires you, right? How is that? That way?
Sorry, what?
I'm saying music also inspires you, right?
Yes,
So
yes, yes, yes.
how
So
it is plays in your travels.
yeah, so basically I'm a very musical person. Like my name also has something to do with music.
Okay.
So whenever I travel to a place, I usually try and read or listen to some music from that place, like some local music, old and new, like folk music and modern music as well. And when I go there, I usually, like ask people, what do you listen to? Uh, like, please, like, let me listen to it as well, something like that. And then some of the like weirdest and most interesting musical uh, like songs or like music I've heard is in Turkey. I've heard some like really good stuff in Estonia. So this happened by coincidence. I was in Estonia and I was walking through the town square, and it happened to be their like national music festival going on basically.
Okay.
So basically, like people from all around Eastern Europe and Estonia and all the ethnicities in Estonia, they were performing their local folk music. So I just sat there for like hours just listening to that local music, and it was amazing. Like they yodel, they, their accents, their yodeling techniques, their instruments. It's so amazing, and it just like it it makes you feel that like you're there. You're there at that moment in that country. Uh, so yeah, like music is like one of the, again, like, and like as I always like tell people, it ties in, like that architecture part, that music part, language, food, all of that, like ties into that whole travel experience. Like if you don't experience all of this, like I would say people, like, you haven't traveled, you've just been there, but you've really got to experience what the locals experience, and that is through this, like through the buildings that they live in, through the food that they eat, through the music that they listen to. So all of that, like that entire experience basically is what I travel for. So that's like one of my biggest reasons why I travel as well,
Yeah,
to
I think
experience all of
music
that.
is something which not everyone considers, but for me, it was a different perspective. Like, thinking about a country in terms of music.
So yeah, I mean basically because um, we are not used to listening to other kinds of music, especially like although in like 2021 like we are connected so much, especially since the lockdown also, like on online mediums and everything, but still we don't think of like what kind of music does Turkey have, or what kind of music does Mongolia have, or what is the local music of Italy. We don't think of that, like we just think mainstream.
Hmm.
But then like once you start exploring into these things, like it's really really you'll be surprised at the amount of art that every single community, every single country, place produces. And I mean that has got to mean something, right? I mean it's
Yeah,
it's it's their
sure.
identity. So
Yeah,
like
I mean,
definitely
it's
that is the way I see it.
perspective, like how you see a country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So music is one of the biggest parameters on how I see a country.
Judgments are based on that.
Yeah, totally, totally.
Okay. Okay, so we talked about architecture, we talked about music, and one more important part is food, like you said. And considering you are a foodie at heart, so, which place is your favorite in terms of experiencing the food?
In terms of experiencing the food, I would say like two countries top my list because like they're very different countries in terms of food, like in terms of what they eat. So first is Iceland. I visited Iceland a couple of years ago, and they have some of the strangest food on the planet. Um, I can't say if it's like extremely delicious or not. That's like a very personal preference, but it is definitely interesting for sure.
Okay.
So, like some of the recipes that they have is like they basically bury a shark in ice because well, Iceland is like they have ice there for a long time. So basically they bury it in ice for months, and then they remove the shark and then they eat it, or they eat reindeer, which I also tried.
Okay.
So they have like a variety of weird animals that they cook and eat. So basically, because it's an island and it was remote for the longest time in its history, so they had to innovate, like from whatever they had on the island, whatever traders could bring in, and whatever could grow in like such a cold place. They had to innovate, and this is something which I really like how did these foods come into existence? Like why are they burying sharks in the ground? Or why are they eating reindeer? So basically all of this, and how do they make it, how do they prepare it, what kind of like spices do they add? So like this also plays like a very good part in understanding the food and the food history behind it, which is also very interesting because I've like whenever I travel, I try to go to that again, like a local place, eat like the most local food. And I never try to eat like what is my comfort food. I won't eat it when I'm traveling because like in my head, then I'm not experiencing that country completely. So I will eat entirely local. Uh, and it's also cheap. Like if you eat local, it's also very cheap. So yeah, like Iceland is one of the weirdest and most interesting places in terms of food. Um, Thailand is again like a very very good example of food because like a good part of Thai food is like influenced by Indian food, but it's still very very different. So they've got like the same ingredients that we use, basically the same masalas, the same curries, but still the end result is different because of the way that you make it, because of the some two or three ingredients which are different. And again, I've eaten some very, very weird foods in Thailand.
Okay.
All of these insects, like flies and like bees and spiders. So they basically fry it and like put salt on it and basically just eat it like chips,
Yeah.
which might seem a bit disgusting at first, but it is actually really tasty. It's crispy, it's crunchy. What's not to like? So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, so
So
like yeah.
I remember like when I was speaking to you last time, you told me about some dishes which actually is not Indian. Like you consider it Indian, but they're not. So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so basically, even I found out like this like a bit later when I started traveling that some dishes which we consider completely Indian are not at all from India. One prime example being samosas and jalebis.
Mm-hmm.
Like both samosa and jalebi are like originated in somewhere like in Turkey, Arabia, Mediterranean, that region. So it's extremely popular there. And like it turns out that they have got chicken samosas, which are also very, very delicious. And the jalebis that they make, they're more sticky, they're more sweet, but essentially they're the same shape, they're the same color, and it's basically the same dish. And it's from there when like these invasions happened 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, that these foods came into India, and we just like we improvised on that, we improved on that, and like we made it our own completely. But once you start to travel to these areas, then you start to realize like, okay, like this is their local food actually. This is where it originated, and it's slightly a different recipe, slightly a different version, but it's amazing. And you get like samosas in small towns in Portugal as well. They're like smaller samosas filled with chicken or filled with meat. It's really, really delicious, and it's their evening snacks too.
Okay.
So that is when I started to, actually go more into food history as well. Like from where did these foods come from? So what is the original recipe? Then I started to go to these places and eat that original food there. So it's very interesting, like food and travel. Basically, like travel and food go hand in hand. So like even like traders 500 years ago when they used to travel, they used to bring foods from everywhere, and that is how these recipes are created, right? So it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, that's very cool. Okay, Nishad, so move ahead. You have been to 40 countries. You have
Yeah.
taken so many flights. Then a lot of experiences people have on airports and immigration. So any interesting stories from airports or immigration?
Many, 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 many. I've got some scary ones. I've got some like funny ones. I've got very tedious ones. Start off with a funny one, I guess.
Okay.
So actually, me and my friend were traveling throughout Southeast Asia. So basically, Thailand, Vietnam, and Cambodia. And I have actually never, ever, ever been late to an airport or like missed any train, flight, bus, car ever in my life. But we were in Bangkok, and our flight was supposed to be from Bangkok to Phuket, which is like a 2-3 hour flight.
Okay.
And we were already running a bit late because we like completely forgot to like look at the time. So we were running a bit late, and like like it's Murphy's law. Like once everything starts to go downhill, everything will start to go downhill. So we basically got this tuk-tuk driver who was going at the speed of 5. And we like I'm literally yelling at him like, please uncle, like please go faster. We have a flight. He's like, no worry, no worry. I reach you. And then I wanted to tell him, like, Mister, like please hurry up. And then so all of these like tuk-tuk drivers in Thailand, they have like their ID card stuck on the back of their seat. And I looked at it, and his name was Mr. Porn, like Mr. Porn. Like, Mr. Porn, please go faster, like And, like he completely failed to see the joke in that, but basically Mr. Porn is the reason why like me and my friend missed our flight. Then we fought at the airport, and we had to explain like the counter lady that Mr. Pon was very slow. That's why we got late. And please give us a different flight. We were like, no, you'll have to pay for a different flight. So like we had to wait at the airport, and like we booked a different flight and then went there. So this is one of like the funny incidences which has happened. Then again, one of the most easiest immigration things have been from Vietnam to Cambodia. This is a very interesting border crossing basically. So what we did is we took a boat in Vietnam to go to Cambodia. So basically, this I don't remember the name of the river. I think it's the Yangtze, or I don't remember the name. But so basically, it's basically like a huge river with a lot of tributaries and streams, and you can hire a boat and just go around in the boat for days. And incidentally, it so happens that you can also cross the border via boat. So the border is nothing. It's just like a small tapri, and there's like two hammocks. So you get off the boat, you sit in the hammock, people will bring like coconut water for you and everything. Some random man will come, he'll take your passport, go with it for like half an hour, stamp it and come back. And all this time you're just like lying between coconut trees on hammocks and like just looking out into the river, sipping coconut water. One of the most easiest border crossings ever, like to get into Cambodia. It's nothing. It's the best immigration ever, like till date.
Okay.
So yeah, like interesting anecdotes from every immigration place, everything. The exact opposite is in from when you go from Cambodia to Thailand, it's the exact opposite because there's like a mile long no man's land and you have to cross the border on foot if you go by car. So the car will drop you at the Cambodian border, then you have to get your documents, get your photo, get your visa, and cross to the Thailand side. But we had like extremely bad luck. He like the immigration officer was angry that day, so he wanted like a lot of documents. And it so happens that there's no printing shop on the Thailand side of it. So you have to go back all the way to Cambodia in the heat, walk 1 kilometer down, and then go again. So we did this 3 times because every time we went, the immigration officer wanted something else. So we had to do this 3 times, like back and forth, and then go into Thailand. And then he was like, okay. And then we missed our bus again. So like that trip, we missed a lot of stuff. But yeah, all in all, like a very interesting journey. And that's how you learn basically. So you know next time what to do, what not to, what to carry. So you have to carry like extra photographs. You have to carry extra, like passport copies and like photocopies of every document that you have. So it's just better to have these things in place. So yeah, it's like very interesting events at immigration and border control.
Yeah. I think a lot of people face the hassle, but some are very interesting ones, worth mentioning.
Yeah, so I mean, if basically, uh, like our Indian passport isn't a strong passport, so you will be questioned at every border, as to like why you're going to that country, what is the reason, show your visa, show your this, show your that. But like once you get past that initial hesitation of explaining to that officer, then you're sorted. Then it's actually very easy, and you get into that habit of doing it. And like even if you like you go to Cambodia and Thailand and you have to cross the border 3 times, it's still fun, because there's a story out of it, like who does that, who crosses the border 3 times.
Yeah.
So it's like it's still fun, definitely.
Right. Very interesting. So you have been to Indonesia also, right? Bali and all.
Yes.
So I think we talked about that. We were supposed to go to a place and we ended up meeting some official company. Yeah. What was that?
This is also a very funny story. So actually, so this trip was basically throughout Indonesia. So I started in Jakarta, then so basically the city is called Yogyakarta, but they like in their dialect they call it Jogja. So like from Jakarta to Jogja, and then took a flight to Bali. And I was in Bali for 10 days, which is like also like an entire different story altogether because it's amazing. Like their culture, the rainforest, the volcanoes there, amazing. But I decided, like since Indonesia is like a very big country, it's made of like 3,000-4,000 islands or something like that. There's this very small country called East Timor, which is like right next to Bali, basically. It's a very small country. It used to be a Portuguese territory, and they recently got independence like in 2002. So it's like a very new country. And since it used to be Portuguese, like India has got like a shared connection to Goa and all of that. So I'm like, I need to see this country. It sounds very interesting. People don't go here. It's still very underexplored. No one that I know has been there. So I looked up, how to get there, and basically says it's visa free for Indians. So you
Okay.
can just go there. So I booked a flight from Bali to East Timor. I go to the airport and they say that, oh, sorry, we just came up with a new rule last week. And I'm like, where? And they're like, we should read the fine print in the ticket. It's written there. I'm like, who does that? Because if like your website says it's visa free, it's visa free. So they're like, no, 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 it is visa free for everyone basically. But for Indians, Pakistanis, and Bangladeshis, you need a separate letter from the Consular General of the country saying that you are allowed to visit this place.
Okay.
So then I asked the ticket lady, like, how am I supposed to meet the Consular General of an entire country? And she's like, no, 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 he's like right here in Bali. You can go to his house and he'll give it to you. I'm like, weird request, but okay. Like, so I Googled this person's address. So it's his house and it's also like an embassy of East Timor in Bali. So I go there. I ask the security, ki, uncle hai kya ghar pe? He's like, no, no, today he's out. Like he's vacationing. He'll be back tomorrow. Then I went back tomorrow with my ticket and with my application. I wrote like an application, pen say on paper, like, dear Mr. Consular General, I want to visit your country. I think, it's very good and etc. etc. And then I met him. And so he's like, do you want tea? I'm like, okay, give me tea. Just so basically, this Consular General of that entire country was sitting. We were just having a chat. We were talking for like 30 minutes, and he was asking me about my travels and like how I decided to go to East Timor. He's like, no one goes there. Why do you want to go? I'm like, it's your country. I want to go there. I just want to experience this place. So he's like, okay, okay, no issues. Like I'll give you the permit and everything. So he stamped my application and he gave me like a letter with like a very official letter with the country seal and consulate general and with his like big signature and everything. Like very very happy at that point. No, ki I've got the letter. I'm going to visit this country. And I had that sense of like going there for the first time. No one has been there. I want to be one of the first people to go there and experience this. And then, as luck has it, the next day a volcano blew up in Bali, so my flight was cancelled. So I
Oh.
had to stay in Bali for like 4 or 5 days extra because all the flights were like cancelled. So I've got like a very bad track record with natural disasters or like man-made disasters and traveling. So that has happened like a lot of times. I've been to places and a volcano has blown up. The next day floods have came there. The next day bomb blasts have happened. This has happened like at
Oh.
least 6 to 7 times.
I hope you are
So
not the cause.
exactly, I don't know. It always happens. It literally always happens. So I came back from Himachal like literally like a week ago, and it's like flooding there right now in Himachal. So
Yeah, like
it always happens that I
cloud,
go.
right there.
Yeah, exactly. Literally the day I came back, that cloudburst happened. It always happens. It happened in Kashmir. When I was in Istanbul in Turkey, like one of the worst terror attacks happened like the minute I left that place. So it was also a very scary thing. Like I wasn't like I just got onto the flight, and when the flight landed back in London, I called up the people in the hostel there saying, like, are you all right? Because the bomb blast happened exactly outside the hostel where I was staying.
Oh.
So those people like they were in the middle of that. So that is also something very scary. But like anything can happen anywhere. That doesn't mean you stop traveling. So
Very true,
definitely.
very
So
true.
yeah.
So Nishad, this brings us to the end of the talk, and it was so much fun listening to your stories.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
This
is there a way people can follow your travels? How happen they actually?
Yeah, so people can follow my Instagram where I usually post most, if not all, of my travels. Then, if someone's interested in reading about them, I've also got a blog called Traveler Nishad, so people can follow that. But usually, it's my Instagram that I keep on posting stuff. Uh, my like domestic and international travels are well documented on there. Usually, when I travel, I'll also make videos and stories and posts about that place.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that's the best way to like follow my travels throughout.
Okay, great. So when you just post the side series, we'll tag you so that
Yes.
somebody interested to follow your travels can follow you.
Yeah,
Okay, Nishad,
definitely.
thank you
Okay,
so
Nishad, thank you
much.
so much. All right. Yes,
Yeah,
thanks, Shubha. Yeah.
thank you, and thank you
Good to be
everyone
here.
for
Thank you
joining
everyone
in.
for
We'll
joining
see
in.
you
We'll
again
see
next
you
time with
again next time
another
with
wonderful
another
travel.
wonderful trip.
Thank you.
Thank